who's collaborating on this project for some context. Revisit the project overview, just to remind you all, since it's been a few months since we talked about this, what our scenario planning process is. I'll be reviewing and giving you all what our strategies, perspectives, and scenarios are to define them. Then we will be in a workshopping exercise, which we're going to do via breakout rooms, which, if you're familiar with Teams, is a fairly automated process. And then we'll talk about the next steps in the study and adjourn for the day. So the project team, this is a planning process led by SJTPO, which we have Jennifer Marandino, the executive director, and David on, as we just saw. And then most of you, I think, either are familiar with or are members of the Technical Advisory Committee and are putting into this process along with us, the consultant team, Stantec, along with Stokes Creative Group, which are supporting this process. I want to introduce our consultant team here today, since they'll be facilitating your breakout rooms. So we have Perry Scherenbaum, Ralph Danisco, myself, Shanae Patel, and Sonia Sternlieb, and Sophia Fox also here from Stokes. So you'll get to know one of these members a little bit more in your breakout rooms today. A reminder on the project: this is scenario planning, and scenario planning is a process of looking at what ifs into the future to understand different priorities regardless of different futures. And this is here to support SJTPO's long-range transportation plan process, which will be starting in earnest later this year. And it is a really great opportunity for stakeholders like yourself to give input into the process while we're allowed to still look more broadly, and we're not as focused in and honed in as you might see in a formal RTP process. How does scenario planning shape the future? So we are working on scenario planning right now, as you can see on the left. And it's big picture thinking, it's goals and visioning. It provides a little bit more flexibility and creativity to think outside the box. Then SJTPO will be moving into the regional transportation plan, which is the more formal, defined strategies for the next 25 years. And those will be driving funding decisions in the region. So thank you for participating in the early parts of this process. So we are developing what we considered a shared vision of the future as part of this process, which shared means with all of you. So we really appreciate you coming today to share your particular perspective. I know many of you are representing specific counties or specific perspectives like planning or emergency management, and really encourage you to speak up today and share how you see the future going based on your expertise, because that is extremely valuable. Right now, we're in phases 5 and 6 of the formal scenario planning process, which is to explore our scenario impacts and plan for our desired future. And if you were here last time, you saw this slide before as well. Just to go over who all were engaging as part of this, there was a community public survey that happened in 2023. You all are the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, and many of you are members of the Technical Advisory Committee, and then all of this led by SJTPO with support from us as a consultant team, are all feeding into this process. And also, just to give you a perspective of where we are in our project schedule. This is the second workshop, and we are wrapping up our scenario impact assessment, and we are going to be moving into actually applying all of your feedback today and the assessment into a review of the vision and goals that relate to the regional transportation plan. Yes, I will take a brief stop. I admittedly can't see if there's any hand raises. Just want to make sure there's no questions before we jump into maybe the more technical part of our presentation today. All right. So, as I said, this is maybe the slightly more technical part of our presentation today as we describe what is our scenario planning process and how you're going to be interacting with it today. However, based on feedback from our last workshop, we have tried to consolidate some of the terms, make things a little bit more transparent and accessible for all of you to interact with this process. So hopefully this will not be as intensive as the last workshop and will really reduce the barrier to you all interacting with these scenarios and providing how you would, how you're going to think about these kinds of perspectives in the future. So with that said, we have 4 perspectives that we're going to be looking at today. First one is weather and climate. The second is leisure and entertainment industry. The third is community quality of life. And the fourth is personal economic opportunity. So under each of these perspectives, there are 3 scenarios. So there's an optimistic, business as usual, and pessimistic under each perspective. And then under each scenario, there is an opportunity to have different priorities across the 10 strategies, which we will be showing you all today. So this may, as you can see, as you kind of move from left to right, this does start to multiply out a lot. And so as far as our workshopping process here today, in order to allow time for good discussion, we will be breaking out into the 4 different perspectives so that you can collaborate and focus in on just the 3 scenarios under the 1 perspective here today. So there will be opportunities to provide feedback for other perspectives. So I said there are 3 scenarios: optimistic, business as usual, and pessimistic. Each of these are within the context of the particular perspective. So optimistic is maybe considered rosy. It's what would South Jersey look like if things went well for that particular perspective. Business as usual, what would South Jersey look like if things really just stayed as they are? And then pessimistic is a more negative connotation, but what would South Jersey look like if things don't go well? Which, of course, we never want things to not go well, but it is prudent for all of us to think about a future where things maybe don't go the way that we would like them to, so that we can think about how our priorities would change. One thing that I do want to emphasize here is that the scenarios that my team, in conjunction with SJTPO, have developed are all considered reasonably within the realm of opportunity, of possibility, though maybe a little bit stretched just to think about the fringes of where we might be going, to kind of open it up for this exercise. but I want to emphasize that the focus here today is not necessarily the probability of these particular futures, but to allow ourselves to think in the vein of, well, if this does happen, and if we kind of think about it as, okay, if this is for some reason a given, then what? I think the then what is our important focus here today. So as I stated, we have 10 strategies that we will be asking you all to rank in their importance to you under each of the scenarios. So these 10 strategies are representative of different programs and initiatives that SJTPO has interaction with, direction, and are related to the strategies that are listed in the draft RTP. And so this will be repeated for you on your digital worksheets here today. So don't worry about having to write down this list. But I do want to provide a little bit more context of what each of these mean so that we're on the same page when we are talking about them in the workshop portion. And since I know you are all probably a little tired of hearing my voice this morning, I'm going to pass this slide off to Shanae.
Right, so starting off with the strategies from the regional transportation plan, we have first and foremost prioritize system maintenance. So just maintaining existing systems over expansion and assisting subregions with pursuing federal funding for pavement preservation and improving incident response to events, to natural hazards, to weather events, and also incidental things like storm cleanup, litter removal. So anything after the fact, funding would go to improving responses to those incidents.
Sonia?
So strategies 3 and 4 around promoting technology in transportation. So that's bringing in concepts like intelligent transportation systems, dynamic messaging, vehicle detection, to make transportation more efficient and swifter. And then our option 4 is around promoting transportation alternatives through public awareness of what these other forms of transportation are. So raising awareness around things like using ride shares, using electric vehicles, carpooling, cycling, or walking to destinations, and then as well as supporting the agencies that provide these alternatives and help make them happen.
Thank you. Ralph.
Hi, everybody. Just before I even read these, you're going to see them again, as Emily was saying, when we go do our individual ranking. And the thought, just as a reminder, is, depending on which of the scenarios or perspectives play out, whether it's optimistic or rosy, you might choose different strategies, right? And that's what we're going to get into. And I'll also add, I think, these 10 strategies are kind of aggregated again from the many things that are already listed, as potential interventions from SJTPO. So each of these is pretty broad. So strategies 5 here is advanced transit, especially for the transportation disadvantaged. And this would be trying to, not only add transit service, but make sure that it has a particular focus on communities that need it the most, all throughout South Jersey. And number 6 is strategies to reduce summer congestion delay, especially, during the peak summer season, around the coastal areas and any other kind of tourist areas that really experience heightened demand during the summer, and to plan and fund the kinds of improvements that would make a difference for reducing summer congestion and delay. So thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Perry?
Perry might be muted.
I will take on this one. So strategy 7 is promoting projects that reduce emissions. This is promoting projects that are specifically reducing emissions on the roadway, such as intelligent transportation systems and signal optimization, bicycle and pedestrian safety and facilities, transit or roundabouts. This does have a lot of overlap with some of our other strategies, but is from a particular motivator for specifically reducing emissions in the region. Number 8 is improving truck routes. So this is working with regional partners to identify and evaluate truck routes and other critical freight corridors with concerns around accessibility, reliability, safety, and other performance measures. So this is movements of goods and the safety for larger vehicles and the vehicles around them. And rounding out our 10, 9 is address transportation vulnerability. So this is specifically talking about the vulnerability of transportation assets to be damaged. And so this would include elevating roadways or bridges where appropriate, and some other mitigation type strategies. And last, and certainly not least, is promote and advance safety projects. So this is expanding the state and regional partnerships to identify and reduce the barriers to safety projects, actually advancing, and providing design assistance and support to ensure projects do reach the construction phase, especially those ones that have safety at their core. So actually gonna pause here for a second. I know we just put a lot of information in front of you. Are there any questions about what any of these strategies mean? Thank you, Ralph, for coming in and reinforcing that these are things that are obviously in many ways all good ideas, but you have to prioritize to a certain extent because everything is finite. And thinking about which one of these are more important than the others to you under these different scenarios will be our exercise today.
Hi, it's RJ with New Jersey Transit, and I'm a little new to this, so just a general question. Are there assumptions in the various scenarios about growth in population, land use, density, that sort of, these factors obviously would be different based on what happens in terms of, like, are there goals for that within the rosy status quo and poor scenario?
So what I'm going to jump into next is I'm going to lay out what we have put forth for the different scenario options. So hopefully that'll answer your questions as far as what's going into these different scenarios. I will emphasize that the scenarios as we present them here today are not hyper technical because we want to focus on how this interacts with all of yours expertise, but there will be more, I guess, very more specific parameters in the final technical report available to all of you.
Emily, can I jump in here? Because I
Yes.
think you're right, and the question is a perfect transition to the next part of the presentation. But it's worth a reminder on scenario planning is really what we're doing is we're saying for the different perspectives, right, which Emily's going to go through, there's things are going to go well, things are going to stay the same, things are going to go poorly, right? And the goal ultimately is to say, if things were to go well, these are the strategies I would prioritize. And if things are going to go poorly, then these are the strategies I would prioritize. So absolutely, there are assumptions in the perspectives about exactly what you said. Population may grow or shrink or change. Economic vitality may grow or shrink or change. And in each of those, the exercise we're going to go through later on is to say, if this were to happen, these are the strategies that are the most important to adopt. Not that we're going to pick up, Not that we're going to pick this is the most likely thing to happen. We're not good at that. We're just going to say, if this is what I would do.
Public policy report.
All right, sorry, Emily, for the sidebar.
No worries. Thank you for chiming in, Ralph. I think those of you listening on the call, just do make sure if you're having other conversations at your location to just make sure you're muted on our call. Thank you. Okay. So our first perspective, which I listed the 4 previously, we're going to look at is weather and climate. So I'm going to give a brief overview of what each perspective is and the scenarios here, but there are more in-depth descriptions that you'll read through together as part of your breakout rooms. So this is just to keep us all from falling asleep to the sound of my melodious voice here together. So weather and climate perspective examines different futures, and it considers sea level rise, flooding from rain events, temperature, air quality, and extreme storm events. For this particular perspective, we have used guidance from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection and the New Jersey Flood Mapper tool to select 3 realistic scenarios. For our weather and climate, to give you a general flavor of what the 3 scenarios are, business as usual is South Jersey continues to see these increasingly intense weather events a bit more frequently, as we have, I think, all recognized over the last several years. And the climate continues to change at its current pace. However, I think to keep in mind that, yes, we're seeing some intensification, but that this is generally a manageable scenario. Optimistic is that South Jersey only experiences very slight intensification of weather, and the climate is really going to change at a manageable pace. Things are a little bit more easy breezy. And then pessimistic is that there's going to be more severe weather, and we're going to see unmanageable swings in things like temperature. And those are going to be our 3. The next perspective is the leisure and entertainment industry. And so this is considering the casinos, beaches, and other natural attractions like different preserves here in South Jersey, and of course, boardwalks and those related restaurants and other tourism attractions that are in the shore towns. Once again, I think you can maybe guess at what some of these scenarios are going to look like, but the business as usual is things stay as they are. South Jersey maintains its position as a popular regional vacation destination, and there's a local shore culture. Optimistically, South Jersey lives up to its potential as a top location to relax and play for visitors and residents more year-round. And then a pessimistic scenario is that South Jersey leisure and entertainment options diminish and lose popularity. Our next perspective is around community quality of life. So we're looking at healthcare, emerging technologies, the aging population, intersecting that with walkability and social services. And for this, business as usual is that the quality of life remains mostly tied to income level, and many vulnerable groups are disadvantaged, which is mostly the reality here today in South Jersey. Optimistically, people of all ages and incomes live comfortably in all stages of life. Pessimistically, we're seeing disadvantaged groups not having a sustainable quality of life. Average citizens wouldn't necessarily be considered comfortable, and high income or accumulated wealth is really the only way to be comfortable within the region. Last, but certainly not least, we have personal economic opportunity. So this is looking at factors like employment and jobs, migration, development and expansion, and housing costs, with a specific lens of thinking about it on the more personal level rather than on an industry level. And here, business as usual is that the local economy has stagnated for the near term, so not big growth, but not a dip either, with some slight upturn as the last of the pandemic recovery occurs. Optimistically, we see a boom. The national and local economy are thriving and growing. Pessimistically, we're seeing some sort of national recession occurs, which we know that they come around, and a lot of times it isn't really at the discretion of particular regions whether a national recession occurs, and that it can sometimes really impact certain regions. So I'm going to once again pause before we actually jump into the workshop session.
Hey, here we are.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you were able to all have great discussions in your breakout rooms. I know I got to listen in on some of them. I'm just going to share some last bit of information as we wrap up here today. So there will be a follow-up email with today's materials. So we will make sure to get you that link again for the digital worksheet in an email. So hopefully that'll be easier to access than the chat for many of you, along with today's presentation. So you can go back and look at the strategy definitions and explore the different scenarios on your own if you would like. There is a 2-week period from today that you can submit the form for other perspectives. And if you have other people who, depending on your role, you have other people on staff that you think would provide great perspective and you'd like to show them these materials and guide them through that, it was more than welcome. And as far as next steps for the project, we'll be tallying those rankings and we'll be summarizing some takeaways from your all's input about which priorities saw more emphasis in specific scenarios, across scenarios, and there will be a draft final report that I believe all of you will get a chance to look at before final publishing if you'd like to provide some feedback. With that, we still have the scenario planning at sjtpo.org email address available if you have any questions or would like to get in touch with any of the project team. With that, I'll officially adjourn. If anybody has any specific comments or questions, feel free to stay on. The facilitators will be available until noon, but as far as the rest of you, thank you so much for spending your time today to give feedback to this important process. I'd also like to personally thank you all for your patience with some of the technical difficulties. I know we're still all adjusting to how to effectively do workshops that are interactive virtually. So thank you all very, very much and have a great, safe rest of your snowy days.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, and David, if you'd like.
I'm sorry. I just want to echo what Emily said. Again, thank you everybody for attending and dealing with the hopefully minor technical difficulties, but I appreciate it. I think it looks like we had a pretty good turnout, and I know in my breakout session I got a lot of good feedback. So I just want to thank everybody for your participation and involvement in this project. That's all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So if I
Wait,
go ahead.
I just quick question. When was this sort of system introduced, and like what makes it like how is this approach different to the way like planning issues were approached before this system was implemented?
Ralph, would you like to comment on that?
I don't know that this is a new system so much as it's a good broad way to look at planning to make sure, you know, it's kind of like a reality check to make sure you're not missing anything big and that you're concentrating on the things that are most important. And you know, I think I don't know if you were on at the beginning of the presentation where Emily showed how this fits in. This is, I think, essentially good information and background for SJTPO to develop their long-range transportation plan, right? Which is where you will actually say, these are the things we're going to do and invest in, right? So this sort of scenario planning exercise is meant to give you that broad perspective and make sure that you're not planning, and I'll use some of the examples that we talked about here in the perspectives, that you're just planning for business as usual and you forgot the fact that the ocean's going to rise 10 feet and that everything you planned for gets thrown out the window, right? Because you didn't even think about it. So this is an exercise in helping you understand and think about how the world might change, and if it were to change in that way, what you would do about it. And that becomes, you know, either some of the strategies get prioritized in all of those futures, in which case we should definitely do them because they make sense no matter what's going to happen, or it only makes sense to do this if we start trending in this direction. And then as SJTPO adopts your longer range plan, you're monitoring that and you say, the world is starting to move in this way. Now we know that we should tilt our investments in this way instead of that way, right? So that's the approach, and that's what scenario planning is a relatively new endeavor that, you know, is either being required or adopted in many parts of the country. But that's essentially the purpose of it, is you're not just doing the same old thing, you're thinking about it from a much broader perspective. That's a really quick overview, Henry. I hope that answers your question, or maybe it raises new ones.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I feel like I always assumed it would be best practice to try to consider all possibilities, but you know.
Yeah, to add to that, it's you're covering all bases. So if there's a pessimistic future, you can triage your resources, and your business as usual planning, your effort is not wasted if things really go bad. And in an optimistic future, you're kind of stacking up and taking advantage of all the good things that come. And you can also think about moving forward and concentrating efforts elsewhere, so you can continuously improve considering the situation is good. So it's a spectrum of futures that you can plan for as a contingency.
No, exactly, Sinead. And I think, Henry, I think all planning always has an element of this. This is a more formal and a sort of more widely accepted process in which to do exactly that.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, I missed. Hi, sorry, I missed most of the meeting. I did click on the link and have started the survey. And if I do that, have I met your needs?